This just might be the most radical Football Manager skin ever. Now, I'm wary of engaging in hyperbole, and I certainly intend no disrespect to any other skinners out there, but I am delighted to finally be able to introduce Mustermann Iconic, a pseudo-attributeless skin which completely changes the way you interact with FM. In a short while, I'll go through some of the main features, alongside some of my favourite smaller bits, but first, a quick installation guide. In the description below are links to sites where Mustermann Iconic is hosted. Head on over and in just a few clicks you'll have a lovely file like this sitting in your downloads folder. The file is compressed, so you'll need WinZip, WinRAR or whatever your preferred file archiver is to unpack its contents. Before that, let's make sure we have a destination. You'll need to find your Football Manager 2024 folder. Here you are looking for a folder called Skins. If you don't have one, no worries, you'll just need to create it yourself, just as I'm doing here. It is important for all letters to be lowercase. Once done, we'll open up our downloaded file where you'll see two folders, Mustermann Iconic and Mustermann Iconic Alt files. Just drag these into the aforementioned skins folder like so. Inside FM you'll need to go to Preferences. Here, or Shift and P. We'll now go to the Advanced tab and select Interface. In the drop-down box, you'll now be able to select Mustermann Iconic. Before you click Continue, however, we also need to turn off caching and turn on Reload Skin. Once that's loaded, we now have to quit. This isn't required for all skins, but with some of the changes made here, these are only loaded when FM initially starts up. Now we're back in, we can head back into the preference menu and reset those caching and reload settings. Let's start with the player overview. There's a whole load of cool things to show you here, and it's also a really good page for showing some of the design principles in play. Immediately, you'll notice there's a lot of empty space. I am someone who can get easily distracted, and when a lot of information is on the screen, I often glaze over the thing I originally came looking for. Instead, I wanted to funnel attention to the key areas and focus on the flow of information. We start with player details, move on to their performance and ability, before then taking in information on training and medical history. Now, I appreciate that a scrolling interface is a departure from what most FM players are used to. I was skeptical at first, but now can't imagine playing without it. Beyond helping to manage the flow of information, it also means this skin is fully supported from 1360 by 768 upwards without having to compromise what is shown at lower resolutions. In theory, it should even work on Steam Deck at 85% zoom, but I am unable to test this. Now, let's talk attributes. This is an iconic skin. Instead of showing attributes as numbers from 1 to 20, they are replaced with icons that indicate a broader range. In some ways this makes things harder. For example, Ollie Watkins off the ball is somewhere between 11 and 15, and I'm unable to distinguish whether it is at the higher or lower end of that range. In other ways, this actually makes things easier. Instead of agonising over the difference between a 13 and a 14, I can instead focus on performance and the actual practical application of these skills. We will move on to performance next, but before we do so, a couple of final notes here. Attributes have been grouped by training focus. This helps to see the relationships between different attributes, what areas of the pitch they impact, and which training focus you might need to select if you want to improve them. This idea was inspired by Ben, the author of the Statman skin, and anywhere you see another creator's logo, this indicates who should get credit. Clicking on it will open your browser and take you to their work. I recognise that Mustermann Iconic is not for everyone, but if there are some ideas you like, I want to make it as easy as possible to find the right skin for you. Finally, I've created a configurable DNA widget. A lot of people have a set of key attributes they like to prioritise in all their players. Clicking on the middle here will reveal selectors to choose which attributes you want to show. Here, I've added determination into that slot at the bottom, so I can now see at an immediate glance how each player measures up against those attributes that are important to me. You can select up to 6 in any order you like, and once done, just click the middle again to hide the selectors. We can now talk about performance, and the pièce de résistance the pizza chart. This is a high-level overview of a player's performance, compared against their peers in the top 20 leagues, shown as a percentile. Now that's a lot of gobbledygook, so let's break this down using John McGinn. Each concentric circle represents 20%, so from the inside out that's 20th percentile, 40th percentile, 60th percentile, 80th percentile, and 99th percentile. A percentile just shows where a player ranks compared to other players. So for example, John McGinn is in the 75th percentile for shots. That means only 25% of players across all positions shoot more often than him per 90 minutes. At a glance, we can see that John McGinn is performing well in attacking areas, especially non-penalty XG and successful dribbles, but he is not as involved in the possession game. This is showing compared to all players, but we can drill down into broad position groups using these buttons on the right. Now McGinn can play in a number of positions, so first it'd be good to know where he's been playing. Clicking on the position pitch above will bring up that information, and we can see McGinn has been playing exclusively as an attacking midfielder. If we select the attacking midfielder group, we can now see that McGinn's performance, when compared only against other players in that strata, looks very different. This is a player who is safe on the ball and gets into goal-scoring positions. He is not, despite his traits to drop deep and play killer balls, a creative player. If you want more information about the methodology, please check the description below where I've gone into further detail. For those who prefer FBref, this exact same information is available in bar chart form by selecting bars in the drop-down menu here. The bars are also available in the player comparison screen, allowing you to have a visual representation of each player's performance, and, once again, allowing you to drill down by position group. Before we leave the player profile and touch on some of my favourite changes and additions, there's one more thing to cover. I love buttons. For information that you don't need to see all the time, there's a chance it's hidden behind a button. Click on the note icon here and notes will appear. Head on down to training and click on this report icon and you'll get more details on their development and be able to set their foci. It's a similar story for medical details too, and you're able to toggle between season and career stats just by clicking on the title. Talking of buttons, let's load up a different save and head over to the tactics page. In the bottom right here, you've got a button that will bring up information relevant to your next fixture. That is, assuming you have scouts and analysts employed. Now none of this is new information, all available through the Data Hub, but bringing it into the tactics screen, you are able to make changes based on it without having to go back and forth. It is worth pointing out that the analyst report and your last 5 matches do take a couple of seconds to show, and if you leave it on that tab when you close, it will also take a couple of seconds to reopen. There are obviously some other major changes here with the layout. Instead of covering up parts of the pitch when you want to change team or player instruction, this will now pop up over the player list instead. I've also introduced footedness indicators onto the pitch, in place of, well, their feet. This is as good a time as any to take a look at the matchday experience. There are a few changes here. Firstly, Wanachup's instant result button has been added in for those who like to use it. I've created a new team sheet just to add a little colour and interest to the team news page, and players' faces have been added to the dressing room. A couple of little changes to the lineups and scoreboards, although where licensed such as in the Bundesliga or UEFA competitions, these have remained unchanged. The biggest change here is the matchday tablet, borrowed from the console version of the game and contains all the information you need. In particular, I've added the team and player analysis options that are otherwise only available at halftime or full-time. This allows you to choose which information you find to be particularly pertinent. For me, I often use the player analysis tab to identify who on the opposing team is receiving a lot of passes, so I can then adjust my opposition instructions accordingly. Otherwise, I tend to stick to the general analysis tab, as I find this most useful for understanding game flow. Finally, we have the full match report, which you'll also see when you use instant result. Inspired by a graphic from Soccerment sent to me on Twitter, this is purely aesthetic, but I think it's cool nonetheless. There was a third key principle I haven't mentioned yet. You thought I'd forgotten, didn't you? Overview pages are overview pages. FM has a ridiculous amount of pages, some I didn't even know existed. This season tickets page, for example. There are others, however, that are super useful and do their job extremely well. Let's take the league overview. I've made some changes to bring prominence to stat leaders, so you can easily see at a glance just which players are tearing up the competition. It would be tempting to make this more of a feature with all stats available, but this would discourage me from using the detailed stat pages, which are far more suitable for this. I've also increased the number of results shown here from 20 in the vanilla skin to the maximum allowed of 100. At one point during FM23, I had a homepage that allowed me to set my tactics, assign training schedules, view the data hub analysis, and so on. It sounds wonderful in theory, but turned out to be counterproductive, as I was doing these things with incomplete information. It's also not the point of a homepage. So instead, I've tried to scale things back. Overview pages are for high-level information, so you can get a quick summary and then delve further in the appropriate place if needs be. For example here, I can see I'm missing a match review session after the Brighton game, and that reminds me this is an imported FM23 save, and I need to rebuild my training schedules. Talking of training, that's a good place to start for a quick rundown of some other things I think are cool before we get on to my absolute number one most favourite feature. In individual training, I've added in FME's quick praise and criticise buttons when multiple players are selected. The coaches panel now takes you directly to assignments, saving you an extra unnecessary click. In a pseudo-attributeless world, staff can be particularly challenging. Pop-ups prioritise tactical preferences and knowledge, whilst profiles are split based on area or department. Player development is equally challenging. I've removed numbers and unfixed the axis so you can still see progress over time without giving away specifics. Back to players because I forgot to mention archetypes. Based on statistical output, players who excel in specific areas will earn badges, giving a quick snapshot of those elite performers. A club vision page that shows you the entirety of your 5-year plan at once and incorporates a silly little animation, because why not? Club and nation overview pages that try and bring a small semblance of that website feel, with news pages to match. In fact, all news pages have been tailored to fit the context they belong to. Not just in terms of aesthetics either. Every news page will contain external links, clearly marked, that will take you to some of the awesome content from across the wider FM community. Blogs, guides, tactics and videos, all things I believe will be interesting or entertaining, or hopefully both. I should probably add that none of this is paid advertising. These are all personal recommendations, as I'm a strong advocate for showcasing the incredible work in the community and hopefully finding things that will be useful to you. These can also be found on the start screen, alongside some others that I wasn't able to fit into the news pages, as well as links to other skins should you need a change. Finally, my favourite addition, and I'm going to once again switch saves to one with a little more data available. It should come as no surprise, given the focus on performance data, that I'm a massive fan of the data hub. There is one area, however, I think that can be improved, and that's in linking information together to help identify strengths and weaknesses. So let me introduce drill down graphs. In the overview page, I've added some buttons here to switch between the different polygons: general performance, team attacking, and team defending. We can see here that we've conceded quite a lot of goals, so if I now click on that heading, this will bring up a relevant visualization for that category. We can see here that whilst 11 teams face more shots than us per game, we've conceded the 5th most. Our XG against appears to be around average, and if we drill down here, we can see that we're leading the way, regrettably, in opposition conversion rate. This suggests a goalkeeping issue, and poor Emi Martinez might be on borrowed time. We can do this for any category, and it will bring up something relevant: scatter graphs, zone maps, XG tables. At the moment you can only drill down one level, but I hope in the future to be able to take that further into player visualizations. For example, it would be nice to go from the previous example into the advanced goalkeeping graph, which would further confirm our conclusion about the perceived goalkeeping issue. There are plenty of other little bits here and there, but I realise I've waffled on quite a bit, and so I'll leave them for you to discover. There are a couple of other things to touch on though. Firstly, I've showcased a handful of different colour schemes throughout this video. There are 12 in total, which are all present in the Mustermann Iconic alt files folder contained in the download. I've tried to provide a balanced variety, with a few slightly more outlandish options for good measure. To change the scheme, copy the file you want into the Mustermann Iconic /settings folder. Then delete the file named Mustermann Iconic settings. Now you can rename the file you just copied over to Mustermann Iconic settings. Once done, you'll need to head back into preferences and reload the skin, turning off caching just like before. Unfortunately, there is not a team colours scheme, and you can blame FC Augsburg for this entirely. Some team colours clash quite significantly, enough to render whole sections unreadable. You can, however, create your own colour scheme by editing the aforementioned Mustermann Iconic settings file in a text editor such as Notepad. I have marked a section Mustermann Scheme covering rows 214 to 241. Colours will need to be defined as RGB values, and you might need to make a few tweaks until you get it exactly to your liking. In the description below, I've added a link to Colour Designer IO, which I found to be a useful site for putting together a palette. As always, I welcome feedback and suggestions. Please feel free to leave them in the comments section below, or head on over to the thread linked in the description on the SI forums. I do like to be transparent, and so I also want to manage expectations here. I will not be updating the skin as frequently as last year. Weekly updates were far too demanding, and I want to have time to play FM and make videos. Unless there is a critical issue, updates will likely follow a couple of weeks after each official SI patch. As mentioned, I know this skin will not be everyone's cup of tea. It is a niche playing style and not necessarily going to cater to the masses, but for those of you willing to give it a try, thank you, and I hope you enjoy it. Until next time.